Hey y'all, I am VictorÜ and I help provide insight to empower. And today I wanted to talk about how insidious a traumatic, formative, activating event can be and how it can feel like. So I'm going to tell a story of how my family would take us, from Chicago to Mexico and back, and how we would travel through the southern states. And on our way to Mexico, we would stop at hotels or try to get hotels, and stop and get some food every once in a while. And there were times when the people just wouldn't serve us, right? Because it was the early 90s and we were bronze. But that, from a trauma informed perspective, can start to instill and shape beliefs about the self, right? Food and shelter are probably like the most basic necessities for a human being. Now, me personally, I see most things, it helps me to filter things through like a spiritual perspective of what is this here to teach me. Specifically, what happened once, I think it only happened once, but in my mind it happened, I replay that over and over and over again. So it happened, that one thing that happened the one time in my 5 to 7 year old brain happened every single time. And what happened was that it was night, we were traveling, I think going south to Mexico, and nobody wanted to ask. I have 3 older sisters, mom and a dad, still together, through thick and thin, and it's been pretty fucking thick. Nobody wanted to make the reservation. Nobody wanted to make the call to the Holiday Inn to book the room. And there were excuses. There were things like, there was silence of like, well, who's going to do it? But ultimately, I remember one of my sisters saying, well, give the phone to Victor. He has the least accent. And so it fell on me to book the shelter, the safety for the family that evening. And so I make the call, and it gets, we got rooms available, and there were rooms available. They were accommodating, and then they asked for the name for the reservation, and I said Victor, and the lady was like, can I get a last name? And I said Enriquez, which is my last name, and they said that they didn't have any vacancy. Said, oh, we don't have any rooms available. And sure enough, we drove past that Holiday Inn, and there was, only the vacancy from like the no vacancy sign was lit up, meaning they had rooms. They had vacancy. It was just like a really shitty feeling that I've processed quite a bit, but that's the thing about traumatic moments and memories, is there's a pretty dense charge to them, and it can take a lot of the world triggering us until we get really aware of oh, this is where it's coming from, which is what I'm getting to here in a second. And just reflection within ourselves of how we can feel it to heal it. Something I'm, let's say, lacking faith in, hesitant about, or there's still some doubt there for me. of like, I feel my anger like right here. I've done I've done a lot of things to map out where specific emotions live for me. Like, this is frustration and anger. This is like frustration and anger towards like men, or the masculine. This is towards the feminine. Stress, burdens, and responsibilities. Expression. Whenever I'm like thinking, like my brows will furrow and stuff like that. Lots of different ways. The gut, the emotional centers, arms. Just, there's been a lot of research that I've done into this area. But like my anger living here, and like me broaching on this subject is more like, okay, so like if I've noticed that when I like scream, and when I'm in, I make space and time in my car to just like scream and let it out. But the worry there, as I've seen in like the healing communities, is like, is it that we're venting out, like letting go of that anger, or is it that we're practicing it, perpetuating it, and keeping it alive? So don't we just, you know, whenever those feelings come up, think happy thoughts. And for me, I would say like the truth is somewhere in the middle. Just having good awareness has helped me. Like, okay, there's all this anger. I don't know what else to do with it. There's nobody around. I'm in my car. This is a safe space to like let out all this stuff that's like really wanting to get out. And that's like one thing of like, how do we deal with like that, the sadness, the betrayal, the disconnection from safety that happens in those traumatic formative moments, so that we can at least live life with a fuller awareness. And that's really it for me. Like, that's the thing that I can always point to, is like, how much awareness does one have? Do I have? Does a client have? Over what's driving them. And so the reason I bring up like the racial discrimination in my early development is because I have a big trigger around having to repeat myself, or around people. Like, I say something and I take the time and energy to enunciate, like I had to when I was a kid, to speak articulately. I take time and energy, specifically around like taking time and energy where usually I just like don't want to. I would prefer to dissociate. That's kind of like the shame and trauma combining and being and playing out. There's this quote by, I think, like Frances Weller or Brene Brown, of like, shame would have us live our lives in hiding, would have us reach our grave unseen and unheard, and breathe a sigh of relief saying, we made it, right? We made it, completely hidden, completely not expressing ourselves, not being present or sharing what is within us with the world. And I think that's where a lot of late bloomers, I feel like, have common ground. But that's going off on a tangent. So yeah, that's a big trigger for me, is not being heard or feeling seen. But in tandem with that is like some stuff that I have against my dad. Still, I'm like still holding it. I'm dissolving it, forgiving, and all that. But there was like a big moment there of like, hey, this shouldn't fall on the youngest person. That's a lot of like shit to put on, you know, a like 5 to 7 year old. And it was formative as well in so far as how I relate to my own masculine and feminine energies and how I like show up and stuff. But like seeing my dad, like the exemplar of what a masculine should be, was like passing the buck and not stepping up, not taking responsibility, being quiet, passive, and you know, like, here's the problem, let me fucking sortear. Sortear is like an expression in Spanish of like, let me deafen myself, let me ignore this. It's funny. But there were like so many years after that where I would mumble and speak very low, and I see one of my nephews especially doing this, and it I not only see it speaking to a person's level of self-esteem and self-worth, but also like it's a big teller. Like, we always give ourselves away, and it's such a telltale sign of someone who would rather dissociate or escape, like into drugs or video games or say like women or relationships, or you know, using people like Tinder and stuff. I would go mumbling again. But that's all an example. This whole thing here is an example of stretching, expanding awareness, gaining knowledge and understanding of self and how we can best relate to the world. Is like, okay, here's this event, here's what happened, here's how I felt about it, these are the needs or wants that were either shaped, established, and or not met. And so moving forward, what is the request that we have of ourselves and therefore of like the people around us, right? We teach others how like we want to be treated. We teach others how to treat us in terms of like what we will allow and what we won't allow. But I definitely taught people, and through other similar experiences, taught people the belief that I took on myself in that moment of like, I'm not worthy of being heard, and I'm not worthy of having my needs met, and it's all on me. Like, if you're a self-sufficiency junkie, right, kind of avoidant in that way, then that, I think that would probably resonate. Yeah, drop it in the comments below. Right, if it's all on you, then there's this feeling of like, for me at least, for sure, of not being able to trust those around me. That in and of itself, but also to support me, to hear me, to understand or do the right thing. Because like, again, that's really fucked up to put on like a 5 to 7 year old's shoulders. There's this thing my sister was talking about like how there are some questions that parents ask their kids, like decisions that they ask them to make as they're getting older, that some parents just don't understand, is giving the kid too much to process. That was a lot of shit to process. I'm still processing it, as you can see. But yeah, I wanted to share that as a kind of example of maybe what to look for. And it takes a lot of practice. It's taken a lot. I've done copious amounts of psychedelics to expand my awareness, to forcibly expand my awareness, and gain a better understanding of why it was that I was having so much trouble adjusting to, I don't know, the human experience, if I can still sound kind of removed from it. Yeah. There's that moment, and then the beliefs formed around that moment, and how, even though I didn't like it, that's how I taught others through my actions of how to treat me. Yeah. So I'm curious what your, like, how this might resonate with you, what you think, like, what your experiences have been. Usually when I say this shit, people just kind of like sit there and be like, whoa. You have this like processing look on their face. It's like, okay, I'm just gonna like let this breathe. So maybe we just need to let this breathe. But I would appreciate any likes, shares, comments. Helps with the channel. Helps me feel seen and heard. Yeah. All right. I hope. Yeah. Hope you're having your needs met. Yeah. Peace. Love you.